Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And here we go.
Live from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to episode 88 of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, where once again, the real Brad Bell and my friend, not just a friend, but a partner, Jerry Reed, also known as
Barbecue 17. What's up, everybody?
Once again, we have assembled to bring you another edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. So thank you for clicking play. Thank you for downloading, whether it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbean. We appreciate the support. We also want to apologize for technical problems. Last week, we had a lot going on. There were some issues with the audio syncing up. I addressed that in the opening of the show in a disclaimer.
You sounded like T-Pain.
Yeah, I really did. I did sound like T-Pain, or I sounded like, oh my gosh, it's so late. I'm blanking on the name. The Decepticon, Soundwave. I kind of sounded like...
Oh, Soundwave, yeah.
kind of like Soundwave, or like Bumblebee before he got his voice back, which he never did. But that's enough about Michael Bay Transformers for this year on this podcast. But we apologize for those problems, and I think everything's going to be running smooth. It's just Jerry and I tonight. And if you didn't know, our main topic is going to be us revisiting the Avengers, the 2012 Joss Whedon film that really kind of not jump started, because that was more Iron Man and the Dark Knight, but really catapulted superhero films into the mainstream. And we started this podcast in January 2013, so that would have been before our time. So this will be our first time talking about the Avengers on this podcast.
Oh yeah, it will be. You're right.
Yeah, and it's a big deal because we didn't want to do the whole MCU rewatch. There's so many podcasts doing that and doing a great job at it. We just wanted to get the heavy hitters like Avengers and Age of Ultron, maybe Civil War, maybe Iron Man 2. We'll see what we'll see.
Thank you.
Iron Man 2. We'll see what time allots. But let's go ahead and get this show rolling with what we've been checking out this week.
Checklist? Check. Double checking of checklist? Check.
Jerry Reed, what have you been checking out this week, my friend?
Well, I think we said I'm gonna save it for another day, but I have been reading through the Last Jedi novelization. It came out last Tuesday. I got about 50 pages left in it, so we'll talk about all those little, nuggets of joy next weekend. But
that's a teaser, folks.
Yeah. I've been reading. Just finished Volume 2 of Mother Panic, which is a DC comic that's from. It's another label from DC. It's not their mainstream. It's not Rebirth. Although I guess it's kind of in Rebirth continuity, but it's called Young Animal. So they say it's curated. I guess that's their fancy word for editor, or edited by Gerard Way, who did the Umbrella Academy and was in My Chemical Romance.
Yeah, lead singer for My Chemical Romance.
So, anyways, I've read 2 of the books from Young Animal. Have you read any? I've read Doom Patrol and the first volume of Doom Patrol, which I really liked. It's very weird.
I read the first 5 to 6 issues, so roughly around the first volume of Gerard Way's Doom Patrol. It wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't even Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. It was further out there.
It is incredibly strange. Mother Panic is not very strange. It's definitely a little unusual, but Mother Panic is another tale of a Gotham vigilante. There's a lot of things. Now, I will say there's a lot of things. When you talk about Gotham vigilantes, there's already a lot of Gotham vigilantes.
Covered in detective right now.
Yeah, it's tough to distinguish yourself. Mother Panic is really a girl who's a socialite, whose name is, I think it's like Violet Page. And when she was a child, she was on a hunting trip with her dad, and she overheard her dad talking with some friend of his, and it sounds like the friend is wanting to buy an hour with her. So you're not sure if it's like a, what he's talking about, but she ends up killing her father. And so growing up, there's always this mystique about her. She claims it was an accident. People are never sure, but she was a child, and so, it kind of, and she was a child and a rich family, got swept under the rug.
It sounds like some really dark crap going on here.
So, Young Animal is sort of a more mature imprint for DC, I guess. DC typically, mainstream comics don't have, like heavy profanity or anything. I mean, this one doesn't have heavy profanity, but there's definitely, the F-bomb dropped a time or two in it.
Which is weird, because this Young Animal, it's kind of like oxymoronic there. Yeah.
But anyway, so she basically has to care for her mother. Her mother has like a mental disorder, some kind of her mother just says like really strange things, almost like a dementia type of thing. Her older brother puts her into this thing called Gather House, which is like an experimental program where she lies. So I guess it's like a school or something. But it's run by this nurse named Mother.
The night nurse, right?
Yeah. No, Mother. The nurse's name is like Mother Patricia or Mother Patrick or something, but people behind her back call her Mother Panic. And so, like, they implant all of these cybernetics into Violet's body, and like train the kids to be fighters and stuff. And anyways, what happens is Violet ends up burning down the school. So now she's an adult. She's going for revenge against people who wronged her, but also doing, vigilante work. And so she wears this really interesting white costume with like a big cape, and she has like a hover bike of some kind. It almost looks like a fox. Like her mask looks like some kind of like white cybernetic fox.
So is it very futuristic, this story? It sounds
it's not.
Like it.
It's actually
really?
not very futuristic. It's actually very gothic, which fits Gotham well. I mean, there's not a whole lot of futuristic stuff in there. She's cybernetically enhanced a little bit, but that's her backstory. So she's a vigilante in Gotham with like a really messed up past. But a couple things I really like about it. So I'm reading Volume 2, which has a couple different stories in it. The stories would not be out of place necessarily if they were Batman stories, just told a little differently. Like, there's a killer who goes after people who survived like horrendous things, who were survivors, and so he hunts them down.
That's just messed up. Like, they've already been through enough. What's the killer's name? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember.
The serial survivor killer.
It's something. The storyline is called Victim Complex.
Oh, what a good. That's actually a decent name.
Yeah, but one thing I will say I really like about it, Batman shows up very sparingly in it. Like, he's clearly operating around this area, but so that's kind of cool. So there's a connection to Gotham, but like they don't use Gotham villains or anything.
Do you think there's any chance they ever pull like Mother Panic into wait, let me get this straight. So Mother Panic is what they call her mother, but is that her vigilante
Mother Panic
name?
Is what they called the nun who was over this program behind her back. They called her Mother Panic. And after like burning down the school or whatever it was called, Gather House, Violet takes on the name Mother Panic as like her vigilante name.
Is there any chance they ever pull her into like detective or just cameo, you think? Or is the idea to keep this in its own sandbox?
It feels like that way with the rest of the Young Animal stuff, but I would say again, if she gets a following, if this becomes popular, I mean, she definitely seems like a character they would bring in. There's a lot of things to me that seem very similar to Batwoman, though. I mean, the whole like kind of the socialite with the troubled past. There's a lot of elements there that are very similar to Batwoman's.
Is she very pale? Is she pale as well, like Kane?
She is not as pale as Kane, but she definitely has kind of the funky rockabilly style going on in her normal outfit. Kind of like rockabilly / gothic, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, the guy who goes after the people who have already been through terrible things, like, he goes around in a body bag.
Wow.
Like, that's like a body bag and stuff. But the art is really cool in the book. It reminds me, there's something about the pages that they're not glossy, so they actually remind me of a 90s comic.
Like the old newspaper that
defined
our childhood.
That's kind of the feel of it. That's kind of the feel I get. The writer is Jody Hauser, and it is really good. I mean, sometimes you have to read it because there are stories where it bounces back and forth between a couple timelines, but I really like it. It's pretty interesting. It's the best of the... Well, I've only read 2 of the Young Animal books so far, Doom Patrol, but I've read both volumes of Mother Panic, and it's the better of the 2.
Because you can actually understand what's going on.
Doom Patrol is very out there. This one's fairly grounded. The story is sort of told a couple different places. It feels like a Gotham story, but I like the idea, again, that they're not using Gotham villains. Batman is pretty sparingly used in how they, bring him in every now and then in the background. One of the things that just went out of my mind. One of the things this kind of reminds me of is, do you remember Simon Dark?
No, I do not.
Simon Dark
It
was a very short-lived series that was written by Steve Niles.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah, he's kind of a horror artist. He's come to HeroCon before.
Yeah, did 30 Days a Night.
And he did a Batman story that had... It was like Batman turning into a vampire. It was like a 12-part story that was...
Was that Red
big.
Rain?
Maybe that's it. I don't know. I like his art. His art is kind of very 90-ish, definitely.
Steve Niles is the writer.
Oh, Steve Niles isn't the artist? Okay, never mind. Is it?
He did Gotham County Line. Do you remember Gotham County Line?
Yes.
Okay, he did that. He did 30 Days. He wrote 30 Days a Night. So another series he wrote called, I think it was like Criminal Macabre. It was like a Dark Horse series. Simon Dark was a really interesting series where he was like Simon Dark was the name of a nursery rhyme in Gotham City, but he was this guy who died and like woke up or something, but he just, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to even describe him. He was like created from the bodies of all these people who were discarded from a medical experiment.
Jared,
it was like, yeah.
I was thinking of Batman Gotham After Midnight, and the artist was Kelly Jones, the writer was Steve
okay.
Niles.
And okay.
So my apologies to Steve Niles.
Sorry. But Simon Dark was one of those where it was like, again, a weird Gotham hero that was in Gotham, but only interacted with Batman ever so slightly. It was kind of like doing their own thing in Gotham, had their own villains and stuff. Simon Dark was way more supernatural. I mean, thematically, it's definitely not the same. But Mother Panic's kind of cool, and you're right. I could definitely see DC, if this book gets more popular at some point, being one of those characters that they want to bring into the mainstream universe.
Yeah, so check that out. That's Mother Panic. I saw the artist is Tommy Lee Edwards, right? And he did a good Two-Face story, actually, on the trade. It's like Batman, Jekyll, and Hyde. And Tommy Lee Edwards. He does
the cover. Tommy Lee Edwards does the cover. The main artists, there's a bunch. I think it's Jean-Paul Leon and Sean Crystal. So, but Tommy Lee Edwards does the covers.
Yeah, he's graduated to that illustrious group that like Mark Brooks and things, and Jim Lee, and Alex Ross, who are just doing the cover game now. So
I will say, Jean-Paul Leon does the first storyline, and I like his art a lot better. It really makes me think of a 90s comic, and in a good way. I don't know, there's just something about it. It's one of those books that it has that, it evokes like a certain... like time period when you read it, which is really strange to say. So
No, I totally get that. When you say the character with dementia said crazy stuff, like Batman and Robin's a good movie crazy, or like realistic crazy?
like her mother has some way where, so there's a bunch of characters that live in the house that her mother lives in at this point. Like the Violet, / Mother Panic has brought in other people. There's like a guy who can control rats and listen to rats. Like rats can tell him things. And I mean, her mother's around like this big, again, they're like a socialite family, so they still have this wealth and this like fancy townhouse. Her mother says stuff that sounds just like out there and crazy, but they're starting to realize like it makes some kind of sense. I don't want to say like on a prophetic level, but there's definitely some kind of wisdom or something she's tapping into.
Yeah, so no levity is pretty straight, forward there with that storyline, it sounds like.
It definitely is. I mean, one of the big storylines in this one is that her cybernetics are kind of breaking down, and so she's having to find the people to repair them. And so, like, her body can just, like, go out, at the drop of a hat.
Well, from a graphic novel in DC to a graphic novel in Marvel that also evokes some 90s nostalgia, I actually been really catching up on Marvel Legacy here lately, getting a lot of those trades, kind of like how you've done with Rebirth. I mean, obviously, Rebirth's been going on a lot longer than Marvel Legacy, but I've been reading a ton of Marvel trades, kind of cut my singles down to really just Batman, Spider-Man, and Star Wars, and everything else is pretty much Marvel trades. And I've been reading a lot of X-Men, and the story I read was X-Men Mojo Worldwide, which crossed over Colin Bunn's X-Men Blue and X-Men Gold. It was a big crossover event from about, probably about 5 months ago, in which Mojo pulled the X-Men. There's different X-Men teams, like there always is. But
right.
He pulled them into this simulation. And it was a pretty cool concept, because the simulation he put them in was like the danger room, but with stakes. They could actually die in some scenarios.
So there were stakes.
And he was broadcasting this all over the world, and as people tuned in via the internet, via broadcast television even, he was kind of sucking their brainwaves. So it kind of sounds like the plot of Batman Forever.
Forever. That's what I was thinking, and you tell me that.
Absolutely. So
Mojo's the big yellow guy, right? That like walks around on the mechanical body.
Yeah, he's like kind of the Jabba like slug who has the mechanical body. He was in the 90s show, I'm pretty sure.
Now what you're saying reminds me a little bit of, was it At an Arcade?
I have no idea.
He was the guy who brought the X-Men into like that, was it Game World or something?
Oh, was that in the comic or was that just on the show? Because I remember that on the show. I mean,
wasn't there a video game too? There was a video game that he was in it.
Okay. Well, the 90s X-Men game was pretty cool too. I had that on Sega.
This was like the Genesis version.
Yeah. But anyways, Mojo Worldwide, he pulls the X-Men into his, basically, playground here that he's broadcasting everywhere. And he puts them through, like, some of their greatest threats. Like, they have to face an evil Magneto. They have to face an evil Apocalypse. Well, Apocalypse is always evil, but they have to face Apocalypse. Like, they have to, like, relive things such as the No More Mutants storyline and things of that nature.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like it plays as X-Men Greatest Hits, so it's not anything original at all, but it's kind of a less contrived way, instead of redoing those stories like they've been retreaded so many times in the comics, to actually redo those stories, but in a kind of outside-the-box, fresh way where it doesn't feel monotonous. And, it was an okay story. I would probably rate it as a good. It was totally worth picking up in trade. If I was buying every single issue, I don't know if I would have dropped off the book, but maybe I'd have been a little disappointed. It was a little bit better than generic, but it was a lot of fun to see, like, the X-Men square off against Magneto. I know that may sound crazy, but it's been a while since like Magneto's been a legit bad guy. So a little bit of nostalgia bomb thrown in there. So that is by Colin Bunn with art by Mark Guggenheim. That is Mojo Worldwide. You can get that on Amazon for like $13 right now.
Okay.
So that's what I've been checking out. Jerry, it's a huge week for Epic News in both the toy industry and the film industry. So let's go ahead and get into this week's Epic News segment. Jerry, I'm going to start with some very sad Epic News, and that is Toys R Us, the famous toy retailer that has defined the toy industry, maybe not in the past few years, but for the past 20-something to 30-something years in the United States and in other parts of the world, at least at the retail level, is on the verge of shutting all stores down. Now, they filed bankruptcy, Chapter 11, to try to redo their finances. They shut some stores down, especially in Europe, thinking they could salvage this, but they're reportedly $6 billion in debt, and they haven't turned a profit since 2013. Now, there's a lot to blame for this, but the rumor is now that their bankruptcy court hearing got delayed to Thursday, but the rumor is that this coming Thursday, I think it's March 15th, they're going to file Chapter 7, which will be liquidating their assets.
Liquidating everything and going to dissolution, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of feelings, a lot of questions that we have going into this. You being a huge collector, me being a collector myself, not at your level, but still I frequented Toys R Us and Babies R Us here lately because about to have our first kid, baby Harper, and y'all have, Allie is how old now? Is she 4?
4.
So, I mean, y'all have probably been there. I mean, I know their prices are a little higher, but Jerry, we can talk about the impact, but just kind of like, what are your visceral emotions toward this news?
I mean, Toys R Us is the last dedicated, mainstream toy retailer. I mean, that's the only one I can think of. I mean, again, unless you're talking about like a comic shop, or a collectible shop that carries stuff, or if you're talking about, again, you'll find some independent toy stores, but I mean, they usually don't carry the stuff I collect, And so this is really sad. I mean, there's not going to be anywhere that, I mean, there is definitely still that kind of exciting feeling going into Toys R Us. And we'll probably talk about a lot of the problems that Toys R Us has had, but it is really fun. I mean, I love going there by myself. I love going there with my daughter and taking her and, kind of roaming up and down. And Toys R Us there's just more selection. And I get that people talk about, everything's online now. And that's true. I mean, most of my collecting is probably from online sources.
E-tailers.
But, yeah, from e-tailers. But still, when you're talking about a lot of things, you kind of like to see them in hand to discover new things.
And they have had a lot of problems, and online was a big part of it. Their online game didn't really get to where it needed to be until roughly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And by that point, it was kind of too late.
Their site, I will say, their online site is very hard to navigate unless you know exactly what you're looking for. I think they're very confusing.
But if you do, sometimes you can find sweet stuff because people don't know
I've
what
bought
they're
some
looking
good
for.
deals on there, but it's definitely not. Again, I mean, Amazon is the gold standard for ease of search, and
absolutely,
you sort of have to have something fairly comparable to to survive that. And I think that Toys R Us their online game was not what it needed to be. And I feel like Toys R Us doesn't clear product out.
Oh my gosh, the Doctor Strange Marvel Legends line speaks to that.
They hold on to old stuff, and I a few years back I heard somebody at one point pitch that as a strength. That they said, hey, if you're a kid and you're like, I heard somebody bring it one time and they said, if you're a kid who still likes like some random show that maybe a kid just discovers. Again, little kids don't always keep up with like the latest trends. They may be in love with, I'm just throwing out like Daniel Tiger. I mean, Daniel Tiger's still around. Daniel Tiger's still big. My little kid still loves Daniel Tiger. Daniel Tiger still has a decent little section at Toys R Us. They hold on to stuff and you can still find things. But when you're talking about other times, they're keeping on older product in lieu of putting new stuff out. I kid you not. Force Friday this year, or last year, Force Friday 2017, they had more Force Awakens and they had more Rogue One product than they had for The Last Jedi.
That's ridiculous, but part of that's Hasbro, right? That's part of that's Hasbro, right?
Part of that's Hasbro, but my Walmart had a big, the Walmarts I went to still had a big section. I don't understand how Toys R Us wasn't able to compete with that. When they're dedicated and they were one of the ones doing the big midnight openings.
The big question for us, especially as people who just like to follow the toy industry and the collecting industry, I know this goes beyond collecting when you talk about Toys R Us being a retail outlet that families go to and buy for their kids for Christmas and things of that nature. But how will this impact the industry of not just collecting, but the toy industry? Because as Hasbro and Mattel's stocks are down tremendously up on this news being released, and they account for 10 to 15% of major toy companies like Hasbro and Mattel's and sales. Toys R Us
some things say Toys R Us is about 20% of toy sales in general. And like a lot of people say, I mean that's just not going to. It's not necessarily going to be the case that anybody else is going to pick up that slack.
I mean, we're not seeing a potential collapse like we did with comics in the 90s. I know this is a completely different scenario, and this is just one retailer, not like Hasbro that's imploding here the way Marvel did. But, I mean, is it going to have that big of an impact? Do you think we'll see less product from, like, Mattel and Hasbro and other places because of this?
I think what is going to be hurt is that Toys R Us has in some ways taken on a role as they have taken on smaller toy lines in advance sometimes, or, smaller products, less well-known. That they have been a bit more friendly of getting, newer upstart companies in and really setting them up. And without that, I mean, it's most likely that some of those larger companies, they're going to continue to, retain footholds, and it's going to be harder for the smaller companies to really get in and do something. I think in terms of collectors, I really don't think it's going to have much impact. I mean, the collector's market really is moving towards e-tail completely.
And it has been like in the past 5 to 6 years. Anyway.
Yeah, it has been doing, I would say since about 2008, 2009, I mean, that has been the direction that the collector's market has been moving in. We were talking about this a little bit the other day, and we stopped so we didn't go through our whole spiel at once, but again, Toys R Us can hang on to like a collector's line and just have it sit there for months and years. Amazon can realize when a single figure is not selling and drop the price.
But the thing is, Walmart does this too. Target's not as bad, but you mentioned the DC Multiverse Classics line, how they've had your local Walmart, the one closest to where you live, where I used to live,
piled up.
Yeah, they've had the same wave piled up of about 200 figures. So
Target moves stuff out. Target is incredible about keeping their product flowing. That's been a big thing. My dad was a Target manager for a number of years. And I mean, that was a big thing with Target is it doesn't sit. I mean, you move to a season, you're moving stuff out. And so, I mean, I had so much stuff from Target because Target would clear stuff out like crazy. And, you get toy lines Target clears out Legos at the end of a season. And I don't think any other retailer does that.
The question is, does Target kind of pick up the slack here? Are they going to maybe see an opportunity? Now, they do a very good job now with things like Black Series and Marvel Legends and, like you were saying, Lego a second ago.
Yeah.
But do you think this will create a bigger opportunity to tap into some of that Toys R Us? Because they still had customers, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think? Do you think that Target sees this as an opening to bring in more customers to that section of the store? I don't think Walmart's going to do much with it. That's just my personal belief.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that anybody's going to be picking up slack. I don't know. I don't know what kind of slack there is. Again, I think at this point, kids are going to buy what's available to them. And without Toys R Us, I think Toys R Us, I mean, again, other than throw the collectors aside, because we get our stuff wherever we need it, So we find it. We make do. I think for kids, again, kids buy what they see, and Toys R Us was a great way for kids to see a lot of stuff, but kids will buy what they see if they're at Walmart, Target, Walgreens. I mean, no matter where, kids are just going to find something. I think Toys R Us tend to be a lot of times people going to pick up a birthday gift, or I think you mentioned the other day, like, the big remote control cars, or, stuff like that was kind of specialized. And
bikes and things of that nature.
Yeah,
I know Target
where you really
and Walmart
wanted a better
has that.
selection. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these originally the big toy market. I mean, we're down to 2. We're down, originally they used to say the big 7 and then the big 5. And now we're down to 2, Walmart and Target.
It's hard to believe. Do you think that there's any chance that, let's use Big Bad Toy Store as an example, it's definitely a collector-driven site, but does somebody come along maybe and see this as an opportunity for a e-tailer to sell toys that not only can cater toward collectors, but maybe their focus is on providing stuff for kids? Maybe they could advertise on Saturday morning cartoons and fill that vacuum left by Toys R Us. You think we'll ever see anything like that?
So here's another thing that comes up. You just said advertise on Saturday morning cartoons. How many kids watch TV?
I mean, I don't know, Jerry. I don't have a kid yet. You do.
No, I know, but I mean, my child watches Netflix, or will have Hulu, or their movies, but there's not a big dedicated. A lot of toy lines do not advertise. I mean, maybe a certain toy like a Hatchimal will advertise or something, but it's a very different market. And I feel like Toys R Us just didn't adapt or couldn't adapt, or maybe it just wasn't sustainable. Maybe they should have went to smaller stores.
A little bit bigger than what a KB was.
A few years back, they should have focused on, again, what made them unique, what made them different. But they continue to have really large stores, and it seems like it just didn't work out.
Yeah, and it's really sad. I mean, we're talking about this from a collector standpoint, having kids, or myself about to have a kid, buying them things there. But there's people that's losing their jobs, and it's really sad that that's the case. And it's really...
And that's a big company.
Yeah, it's a major company. You're talking about people losing their jobs all the way to the lowest associate who may just be in high school and who cares, to somebody who has worked there maybe 20-something years and didn't quite make it to retirement. So from that perspective, our thoughts and prayers are with those people. But, I mean, it is sad. Like, there is no retail exclusive toy place anymore. KB's been long gone, and it's just... It kind of stinks to see. I mean, like you said, collectors will make do. I mean, I think e-tailers are doing great. Entertainment Earth, Big Bad Toy Store, companies like this offering exclusives and stuff. But we talked a little bit about, Jerry, you and I on the phone, a lot of the Toys R Us exclusives that Hasbro put out there, like, for example, the Vision and Scarlet Witch, which I luckily got ordered and shipped 2 days ago. From Marvel Legends, did these get redistributed to be exclusives, let's say in Target or Entertainment Earth, or did they just go and get a wide release?
Yeah. I think it depends on how far down the road they are. If they're slated and already in the works, if they're an exclusive, they probably have smaller numbers, so somebody else is probably picking them up. I mean, it could be Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, could be Target. I mean, guaranteed somebody, at this point, Hasbro's going to make sure that those get out there. There's too much, money that goes into the tooling. Those things are probably already done at this point. If it's a little further down the line, I'm thinking like the Star Wars Black Series figures we've seen. Those could either go to another retailer, or they could go and just be slated as part of a regular series as well. So they could just, add it into a case at this point, and most people would not know any different.
Yeah, so, we'll keep an eye on that. I hope there's some way that things could go differently. It doesn't look that way, but it looks like Toys R Us days are behind them. So I hate that. We've had a lot of great people over there help us with baby stuff, and we greatly appreciate it. So thoughts and prayers out to those people being affected personally. Jerry, there's a ton of epic news. We're not going to have time to get into it. So let's do a quick reaction to these two stories before we dive into DC. So just initial reaction, Patty Jenkins confirms Kristen Wiig as Cheetah for Wonder Woman 2 out November 1st, 2019. Are you excited?
I am excited. I didn't believe it at first. We talked about it a little bit at
my birthday party.
At your birthday party, it hadn't been fully confirmed yet. It's definitely not the casting I ever thought I would see. So, but again, let's go with it.
Well, DC hasn't steered us wrong yet, so there's no reason to think that this won't be great, right?
Hey, there's been a lot of DC casting. I feel like a lot of times it's the casting everybody says isn't going to work that turns out to be really good.
Heath Ledger Joker.
Everybody did, yeah. I like that Tommy Wiseau Joker, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to do a Confirmed Crap podcast on Tommy Wiseau in which we talk about The Room, Disaster Artist, and that Joker audition. So let's save that, Jerry. I trust Patty Jenkins. I really do. She seems to hold this property of Wonder Woman in a very reverent spot in her heart, and if she thinks Kristen Wiig's the right person for Cheetah until she lets me down, which she really hasn't as a filmmaker, I'm going to be fine with that.
And now, I like Kristen Wiig.
I do as well. I do.
A lot. It's just that's definitely not, the role that that's not at all like in the probably top 5 actresses I would think of as portraying Cheetah. Off the top of my head.
No. Like I could see like Olivia Wilde as Cheetah.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head. But if Patty Jenkins thinks that's the right call, I'm going to trust her. I'm really looking forward to that movie, as is my wife, Abby. So now, Jerry, we could talk about this next one for a while, but what is your just kind of initial reaction, going back to that, of Jon Favreau being basically hired as the showrunner for the live-action Star Wars series that's going to launch on the Disney streaming platform in late 2019? Good choice?
Yeah, I like Jon Favreau. I can't think of many things Jon Favreau has done that I didn't like.
Here's the guy that launched the MCU, gave Robert Downey Jr. a chance when nobody really wanted to. So he's got that going for him. Now I know we had like Alice in Wonderland and stuff like that, but kind of this live action Disney boom really hit a stride with his Jungle Book, and he's going to be doing the Lion King here. So to me, he's a good catalyst to get something going. Yeah, he's got such
Elf, man.
He's got such a wide array of things on his resume, and they're all, if you really look at them, pretty damn good. And a lot of things you look at and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know Jon Favreau did that. Like Elf.
Yeah.
So I think
he's the doctor in Elf.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll learn, Brad, when you have a child, is when they latch onto a movie, that's like all that they will watch.
Yeah.
And a couple Christmases ago, now she still watches a lot, but a couple Christmases ago, Elf was like the only movie my daughter wanted to watch.
Well, it could be a lot worse. That's a pretty good one, I guess, to watch.
It's a pretty good movie to watch
multiple
over
times.
and over and over.
All right, Jerry, let's dive deep into this piece of epic news here before we get into our Avengers review.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited too. DC announced a new imprint, kind of like the stuff with Young Animal. It's going to be called the Black Label imprint, and this is supposed to be their outlet for more what they deemed mature storytelling, launching in August. So you have a couple titles announced. You have Batman Damned by Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo. Is it Bermejo or Bermejo? I don't know.
I think Bermejo.
Bermejo, and he did the Joker art on that standalone Joker story a couple years ago. The big one is...
I like his art.
I do too. The big one is Superman...
Did he do Noel as well? Did he do the art for Batman Noel?
I'm pretty sure he did, yeah.
Yeah.
And he did the Mondo Justice League poster, which was all right. The big one here is Superman Year One. Frank Miller, John Romita Jr. It's going to be a 3-part miniseries. You've always talked how Superman doesn't have that definitive story. Maybe, at least that's your opinion. Maybe this will be the one, Jerry. And there's a bunch of stuff here. You got Phil Jimenez, you got DeConnick doing a Wonder Woman story. Greg Rucka's doing a story about Wonder Woman's daughter. I don't know if that's going to be the same daughter that's in the, Frank Miller verse of Batman with the Dark Knight books, but what do you think?
Master Race. Yeah,
Master Race. Thank you. I couldn't think of that. What do you think, Jerry, about this? I personally love this idea because it gives them... This is outside of continuity, so it gives them a chance to tell one-off. When I say one-off, 3 or 4 part stories that are somewhat definitive regarding these characters. Are you excited about this as a DC fan?
I am very excited. Again, I love the fact. I love the fact that DC has maintained continuity for as long as they have. That's kind of one of their big things, is that even when they reboot, they still reboot in continuity. Flashpoint was a way to reboot in continuity. Crisis on Infinite Earths reboots in continuity. Rebirth is a way to reboot in continuity and still tied into everything else. But when you look at some of DC's best stuff, again, it's been times when it's just stood out on its own.
Batman Year One, The Watchmen.
Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Gotham by Gaslight.
Dark Knight Strikes Again.
Let's not go there.
Okay.
So many, The Killing Joke, so many, so many of those books are Batman books. But two, though, it really is when there's a book that just is what it is. And not only that, but also... I think of things like, The Long Halloween or Hush, where when you go back and read those, they don't read like stories that were part of an ongoing series. They read like their own self-defined titles.
Yeah, and I think those are the stories that we all point to. Batman's your favorite character, my favorite character. Those are our go-to stories, either the ones that feel like they stand alone or the ones outside of continuity. So if you're telling me DC is going to do that, not have to worry about being hamstrung by continuity, I think we're going to get some pretty epic stuff. The big question is this stuff going to be so good that they then try to weave it into continuity, So...
From everything that I'm seeing, I just don't think that's the case. Even with all the good stuff from Elseworlds, DC didn't try to weave those things into continuity, but they did use the multiverse concept to still have them out there.
That's what happens here, though? Are these going to be included in the multiverse?
I think everything's included in the multiverse in some way in DC. Which is more just a philosophical thing versus, I don't know that it actually affects storylines in any way. Now, the thing is, DC has always taken, like you talked about with Mother Panic, and Vertigo. If there was a character that really, really worked well, Sorry, Brad, I'm yawning a little bit.
Jerry, we have a Hulk to talk about. You got to get woke.
We have a Hulk to talk about. No, but I mean, think about Vertigo. There were lots of Vertigo characters that, I mean, DC, they did their own thing for so long, but then eventually they wove those characters into certain characters that really worked well. So could some of these concepts make their way in? Yeah, but I don't think that. I think these are going to stand on their own. I'm really excited. I really liked this news. I think it's a good direction. I think it's a good way to get, defined storylines out again that people would be talking about. And there's something to be said for when you can tell somebody, hey, you really need to read, Batman Last Night, or you really need to read Wonder Woman's Daughter. And not, hey, you need to read, hey, you need to read, Batman Detective Comics Volume 4,
and Crisis on Infinite Earths to understand the sit-up, and then listen to Jerry's podcast to understand what that's about.
But think about, people do go back and read Crisis, because it's a good story. It stands on its own.
It's dense. It's dense, though.
It is dense, but, Crisis is one that's kind of always in print. People read Hush.
Oh my gosh, I'm lucky enough I collected those, Jerry. I have all the singles of Hush. Can you believe that?
People go back and read storylines like, Hush or All-Star Superman. And not because of the continuity, because it's a good story and it's easily accessible. And I think that's what they're doing here. Sounds like they're trying to make good stories and they're making them very easily accessible to people.
All-Star
without
Batman.
having to read multiple books.
All-Star Batman, not easily accessible.
All-Star Batman is easily accessible. All-Star Batman is also just insane.
It is. Here's a question I have for you, kind of wrapping this topic up, though.
Yeah.
So DC or Warner's, I should say, has kind of talked about doing this with their movies, kind of doing these one-off stories like a Joker movie, right?
Sure.
Or a Lobo movie. If this is really good and we get like some definitive Superman story per se, like this Miller and Romita Jr. story could be, do you think these are things that then Warner's are like, we can adapt to put as standalone movies? Or do they just not touch
From everything
that?
I've seen so far, these concepts for the first book seem so weird at times that I couldn't see that happening. But I think it's interesting that with the Nolan trilogy, we always talk about the Nolan trilogy, don't we?
Oh my God, yes.
I don't think we have a conversation where we don't go back and talk about that. With the Nolan trilogy, you really could see how they did pull from prominent stories. Were inspired. With the newer DC stuff, it really is tough to see where they got a lot of their, storylines from.
I'll tell you where they got
other than Batman versus Superman, being pretty heavily influenced by Dark Knight Returns.
It seems like that Snyder just looked at the pictures in a comic book, the art, and adapted it to a movie and never read the words.
But you know what? I think that's what we're getting ready to see, though, is we're getting ready to see people do very different takes on heroes that are not going to match up with what we've seen in the mainstream DC universe. I think in some ways exactly like what Scott Snyder did, which is try something different, set things in a different setup, have Gotham and Metropolis close to each other. I think we're going to see elements of these are going to be very different than mainstream DC Universe books.
You mean Zack Snyder, right, with the movie.
Did I say Scott Snyder?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. I mean Zack Snyder. Yeah.
I just want to say two things, and then we'll wrap this up and move on to Avengers. One is I don't want to see any more Snyder and Capullo Batman, which Batman Last Night is rumored here. With Metal, it's clear they've ran their course. I know you haven't read that. You're waiting for the trade.
I haven't read Metal yet.
But it's run its course. I love those two. Their Batman stories have been iconic, especially the main New 52 stuff like Night of the Owls and Death of the Family and stuff like that. So there's that. And I like it being 3-part stories, having a beginning, middle, and end, and not being daunting to this is one of 12 or this is one of 7. I think that's a good approach, Jerry, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, Jerry, let's go ahead and get into our featured review of Joss Whedon's Avengers.
War has started. And we are hopelessly outgunned.
Director Fury, I think it's time.
You here with a mission, sir? Trying to get me back in the world?
Trying to save it.
Doctor, I need you to come in.
What if I say no?
I'll persuade you.
What are you asking me to do? It's called the Avengers Initiative.
I thought I didn't qualify. Apparently I'm, what is it, volatile, self-obsessed, and don't play well with others.
I think they need a timeout.
How desperate are you? And you call on such lost creatures to defend you.
You have made me very desperate.
We're not a team. We're a time bomb.
This is nothing we were ever trained for.
Guys, I'm bringing the party to you.
Now, Jerry, this is usually when I would do stats, but I don't need to because this movie made a crap ton of money in 2012. It's pretty much maybe not now the biggest financially, but if you just bring up the Avengers, you're talking about the gold standard for team superhero movies anyway. I mean, this movie was absolutely huge. I mean, there's no spoiler reel here. There's no stats. What can we say that hasn't already been said? But with that being said, we're going to attempt it because we've never talked about it on this podcast. And I thought
Let's
it would
say some more.
Yeah, I thought it would be a heck of a lot of fun. And one thing I wanted to talk about, Jerry, is do you just remember the hype and people's reaction to this film? I mean, it really was a phenomenon, wasn't it?
It really was. It really was pretty interesting to watch the superhero movies go from Iron Man to the Incredible Hulk to suddenly where the movies were, Thor: The Mighty Adventure and Captain America: The First Avenger, and realize that we were really and truly building up to something. Again, I think about as a kid, what were superhero movies when we were a kid? Other than the Batman movies, the Superman films were before my time. Yeah. I've certainly seen them at this point, but, growing up with the Burton Batman films and then the Schumacher Batman films, but, other than the Spider-Man movies, it was pretty tough to find good superhero movies. Blade?
Yeah, Blade was great.
Blade was like the one that you always kind of went back to and Blade was just a good film, But Steel, Steel was pretty. There's so many of them that were just so forgettable.
Spawn.
Yeah, Spawn's okay. I like Spawn, but it's not the best. But I think by this point we had two of the Nolan films. We had the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, which while Spider-Man 3 wasn't that great, Spider-Man 1 and 2 were insanely good and insanely popular.
We had Bryan Singer's X-Men.
The X-Men series had been, again, Last Stand was, sort of mocked, but we had gone through and had some good movies, so we knew it could be done. Avengers was like the first time there was a lot of payoff, I felt like. We always had things teased. There was always those movies would have something, that teased a bigger world. And Avengers was like the first time that we actually saw that payoff in a movie, I felt like.
I mean, even going back to Batman Forever when he tells Dick, the circus is halfway to Metropolis right now.
Right.
I mean,
you have these things. Oh, is Superman going to show up in the next movie? No.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I just remember just the hype literally going into this movie as we were waiting in line, how people reacted to it. Now after
we bought matching shirts. Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, yes. We used to do this for movies. We would get matching shirts, like if Target or Belk's or somewhere had a
we had
readily
the cool like the Avengers shirt that looked like kind of like a Brady Bunch style thing.
I still have mine. You have yours?
I still have mine.
Yeah, maybe I'll wear it to Infinity War. But and one thing I remember, this was a changing of the tide as far as superheroes in pop culture, because yes, the Nolan Batman films and Iron Man made superheroes relevant again, I would say, but this made superheroes mainstream, where it was cool to like Marvel, at least. Yeah. And to me, if the movie just did that, I think nerds everywhere owe it a little something, even if you're not even a Marvel fanboy. So I thought that was pretty cool. But the question is, I revisited this film. Abby and I rewatched it. I mean, we've both seen this a gazillion times, enough to talk about it. But do you think from today, in 2018, now that we've had all these MCU movies and the Nolan Batman trilogy's finished and all that good stuff, do you think that this film holds up as one of the best superhero films ever made in 2018?
I think it is still one of the definitive superhero films.
Especially when it comes to rewatchability. It doesn't matter how many times you rewatch it. Sure, you can nitpick stuff. It's always so much fun, especially when they get to that final New York scene. It is really, the climax pays off. Here's the thing a lot of people talk about when they revisit this film is, does a lot really happen in this movie? There's a lot of them just hanging out on the helicarrier. Iron Man repairs the helicarrier. You have them, getting the gang together, Coulson, Maria Hill, Sam Jackson, and S.H.I.E.L.D. assembling the team. And then the first hour, Jerry, not that much going on. Hawkeye's brainwashed. You have an okay chase scene in the opening. But when you get to that final act, it's like every time just blows you away. Do you think that this film is too defined by that final act and not judged on its merit as a whole?
I don't know that I would say that. I think this film has nice pacing to it. I think it's really, I think the pacing is really good. And again, while this movie built on the four movies before this, right?
Yeah. You had the 2 Iron Man movies.
Oh, I'm sorry, there are 5 previous, because there's 2 Iron Mans, and then Hulk, and Thor, and Captain America.
Yeah.
While it builds on those movies, and Iron Man 2 definitely is one, sort of a required watching before watching this movie.
Well, just in general, that's a great movie.
I love Iron Man 2. Everybody puts Iron Man 2 so low on their lists. So, but anyways, I think it does a nice job of introducing you to the relationships and the dynamics of these characters. Whether you are a fan who wants to see interactions, or whether you're someone who's not really familiar with these characters, it introduces each character and makes them stand out. Like, everybody feels unique in this movie. Everybody feels like they have personality, that they've got something going for them. There is no sort of like, wait, who is that again? What are they trying to do? this movie doesn't feel crowded, and that was everybody's concern because, you know, we've always talked about superhero movies feeling crowded. That was kind of always the thing about, you know, when superhero movies started having one or, you know, more than one villain in them, you know, or more than two villains, it got crowded. This movie had a bunch of heroes, and remember, people were legitimately concerned about, well, how is this movie gonna, you know, handle having all of these multiple personalities? I think it handles it pretty well.
It does, and it laid the groundwork. It gives you
time to get into this movie, and then it really pays off as well.
And it lays the groundwork for so many things to come, like that, you know, animosity there between Stark and Steve Rogers that will go on to become Civil War in 2016. You see the first parts of that when they're on the SHIELD helicarrier. Mm-hmm. And it's something, as a Marvel fanboy way back then, you know, we even talked about on old podcasts that we only dreamed could happen, and now it's reality. And sometimes it's hard to believe, but if not for the Avengers, you would not get all these other things that come after it. This really just catapulted the MCU into a different stratosphere when it came to movie properties. Like, there were tent poles, there were blockbusters, now there's Marvel movies. They're almost in their own category at this point. And this was the beginning of that for sure. You know, and you talked about character moments. One moment I love from this movie is the first time that Cap meets Iron Man. And preceding that, the scene in Germany in which Loki asked the people to kneel. And you have what's assumed to be maybe a Holocaust survivor who says, you know, there's always going to be men like you.
Yeah.
Just dictators who push us. Like, that is a pretty serious moment, especially for the MCU.
Yeah.
I just wonder if now in 2018, if we would get a moment like this in the MCU. If you go back and watch Phase 1, I mean, yes, there's jokes. I mean, this isn't the Nolan Batman trilogy in Phase 1 by no means. But it does have a little bit less levity. It seems like there's more at stake in Phase 1, which you would think wouldn't be the case.
See, I don't know that I agree with that necessarily.
Really?
I feel like the Marvel movies have continued to have that level of depth to them.
Go back and watch Iron Man 1 and then watch Iron Man 3. And just compare just how Tony Stark acts.
That's a bad comparison because I don't like Iron Man 3, but I mean, I'm thinking one of the most gut-wrenching scenes that I can think of in the Marvel universe is Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when we're spoiling that movie as well.
Which is a great movie. We're going to spoil Guardians 2.
When Ego, when Ego is talking to Star-Lord, and you realize that Ego intentionally put the brain tumor in Peter's mother.
I'm not, I completely get where you're coming from. Here's what I mean. Have you seen Thor Ragnarok yet?
I have not seen Thor Ragnarok.
Okay, this isn't a spoiler for that movie, so even if you haven't seen it, don't worry. We still get those moments, okay? You're absolutely right. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And Black Panther's filled with those moments.
Absolutely. And Black Panther's kind of a different type of movie in general. It's kind of hard to judge it against the other movies. That's just my opinion. But, like, there's a scene in Ragnarok where it's climactic. Bruce Banner's turning into the Hulk, right? And he jumps.
Hulk's in the movie?
All right.
I'm just kidding. You didn't spoil it for me.
Bruce.
I'll probably watch it this weekend.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I have it. Maybe I can let you borrow it or something. But anyway, Bruce jumps out of a spaceship pretty much, and he's going to take on some of Hela's minions. And it's like this badass moment, like Bruce Banner, and we talked about this, Kate and Andrew and I, when we reviewed this movie on like episode 78 of this podcast. But he is jumping down to have this moment, right? And instead of getting that moment, he jumps out, he hits the ground, he doesn't turn into Hulk, and it's kind of played for laughs. Like, it seems like they can give you that moment, but then they undercut that moment a little too soon sometimes. Whereas that levity was there in Phase 1, but it just wasn't so one after the next, after the next, after the next. And that may just be me. And I love Marvel, and I love these movies, but I don't know. Am I crazy, Jerry? You think I'm crazy?
No, I mean, I get what you're saying. I feel like some of the movies you pointed out, again, I mean, Ragnarok seems to have, I haven't seen it yet, again, the only one I haven't seen, seems to have an incredibly different tone.
It's awesome, though.
But, I mean, I thought Homecoming, again, I don't feel that the amount of, I feel the movies have had the most consistent tone of any series that I can think of. Which is amazing to me that we're at, 19 films now?
Yeah. I think Infinity War will be 19.
19. We're at 18 films, and the tone has been so largely consistent across these movies. Again, they feel unique, they feel distinct, but there still feels to be a great mixture of those payoff scenes, humor, things that are serious and things that aren't. I feel they're very consistent. I'm not sure I see that.
Speaking of the serious scenes, one that gets me every time is Coulson's death, and how Sam Jackson, Nick Fury, plays up Coulson's death, and he just throws the Captain America cards on the table, and it's like, he died believing in heroes. I guess that's an old-fashioned notion. Dude, I was about to tear up watching that for the gazillionth time. Was that not a great moment?
It's a great scene. This movie is filled with so many incredible scenes.
It is. Another incredible scene is like the Mark 7 reveal, and when Tony jumps out of the window at Stark Tower, which will become Avengers Tower, of course, and the suit just deploys on him. I mean, oh my gosh, that was so good. What about the Hulk in this movie, Jerry? Wasn't he the one, like, coming away amazing from this film? You were like, oh my God, they nailed it, right?
Two of the parts I love about this movie is I love Black Widow's introduction in this film.
Yeah.
When you think, that those was it like Russian gangsters or something? Yeah. Have her tied to a chair, and it looks like they're about to like take her out, and then she gets the phone call. That was just a really cool way, and she's like, these idiots were telling me everything, and that was really cool. And then they have her go after Bruce Banner. And kind of that, him being in a remote area in India. He's in India, right? He's like in a city. He's like in a city. He's kind of living, not remote, but he's living like a very under the, radar lifestyle. Again, I like kind of those moments early on that just sort of introduce the characters so well. And when he says his tactic to control the Hulk is that he's always angry.
And it's crazy that they sent, Widow to go find him, and now they've really played into the Widow and Hulk having a love
they have
on there.
Again, they let things pay off. I mean, they have someone steering the ship. And that seems to be one of the problems we see with a lot of big franchises is nobody's really... I mean, there's somebody in charge, but nobody's really steering the ship, it feels like.
Kevin Feige's don't grow on trees, man. That's a special guy.
They got something working right there. One of the things I thought I wanted to point out, I know you have it in the show notes, was talking about the Galaga scene. This man's playing Galaga.
I didn't like that in the context of the movie the first time I saw it. It doesn't bother me now.
But here's one of the things. How does Tony destroy the Chitauri at the end?
He goes up into the black hole and puts the nuke up there.
Yeah.
Closes the portal.
And that's how you get an extra firepower in Galaga.
Okay, see, I didn't know that.
There's a little... again, people have pointed that out since then. There's like a thing in Galaga where you can let an enemy take your ship, and then, it's kind of like that. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it does seem to be like maybe something in his mind that triggers his plan.
My God, and what a great Iron Man scene. Like, probably the best Iron Man scene. Like, it elevated that character so much to just being the billionaire, genius, playboy, philanthropist to being not just a superhero, but being a hero. He's the guy who will make the sacrifice. Cap questioned that. He does that, and it makes for a epic scene. And, oh, my God, how about when he's falling from the black hole and Hulk catches him?
Everybody everybody is elevated in this movie. All of the characters, Loki, everybody is elevated. And I think that's one of the big things about this movie is, I mean, everybody comes out of it like you're more intrigued by the character, you're more impressed by the character, you're more upset with the character, but everybody comes out better story-wise.
It's Joss Whedon had his fingerprints all over this in a good way.
Yes.
Unlike with Justice League. But I can just see Joss Whedon like in a writer's room saying, okay, we're going to have Tony fall from the black hole, then we're going to have Hulk catch him.
Yeah.
Like, they really played with their power sets or lack thereof for some of them who don't have, like, powers. And meshed them together so well. And like you said, they elevated one another, Jerry.
The action, I mean, again, when you have the scenes with, Hawkeye and Black Widow, like, on the streets, and when you have Captain America, like, commanding everybody and leading everybody. I mean, it's just such a cool payoff to have that with all of those characters at the end.
And everybody gets their moment. That's what's awesome. Nobody feels shortchanged. Nobody feels left out at all. I mean, and I have to say, that final scene is probably the best climax, at least final fight scene in any superhero movie. I mean, you can argue whether it's the best. Yeah, and it's not like Man of Steel where it keeps going. You're like, oh my God, they're going to punch each other again. It's like you want it to keep going because
it's exciting.
As a geek, it's sheer joy. And a lot of this is driven by Tom Hiddleston. I mean, what can you say about his Loki that hasn't been said? I mean, he was so good that he created a villain problem for Marvel in the fact that nobody could really live up to him.
Yeah.
So that was definitely awesome.
Plus, it has a great end credit scene.
Well, you got Shawarma, and then you got Thanos.
There is not a movie that we go watch that my wife and I don't make a joke about, like, at the end of the movie, like, oh, I wonder if the Justice League's going to be eating shawarma. Or, I mean, any movie we go and watch, we're like, I wonder if, like, the Black Panther and, what's his name, Martin Freeman's character, they're going to be, like, sitting there with Okai eating shawarma. I wonder if that's going to be happening. So, I love it. I love that final scene, them just being quiet, the guys, like, sweeping the floor and stuff.
It's awesome. I'll tell you what else is awesome. Like, they tease Thanos, and you think, oh, that's Avengers 2. No, it was definitely not.
It's a long game they were playing.
2012 to 2018, so it's the biggest movie of the year by far. Avengers Infinity War moved up to April 27th, as we talked about last week. Can Infinity War live up to the hype? Do you think we'll walk out of Infinity War as satisfied as we were walking out of the Avengers? I know it's different. It's going to be
Brad,
darker.
when you walked out of the Avengers, and
I'm not talking about myself, Jerry. I remember how I felt. But I said at the time I gave it like a grade and a half. I just didn't like some of the humor.
I remember you were being like, well, that movie sucked, or something like that. Now, I
was mad they didn't say Avengers Assemble.
You were mad they didn't say Avengers Assemble, and you were like, well, that movie's crap, and so... No.
I didn't think it was crap.
I know. You were definitely dogging it a little bit when we walked out. Everybody else was, like, pretty nuts about it, but...
They were euphoric. I remember I gave it a great, looking back, I was wrong. I should have gave it an epic. Because they don't say assemble, but they do assemble. That moment where that music swells is the score by Michael Giacchino, and it's like that camera pans around them, and you're like, holy shit, this is epic. I mean, this is like why we do this podcast, to talk about stuff like this, and you're like, how can DC not have a moment like that with Justice League?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it just makes you kind of hit your head up against
I hear you.
The geek wall. But do you think that people will we be as satisfied? I'm not talking about me necessarily, Jerry.
Right.
Jerry,
okay.
In general, what do you think?
I don't know. I will say, I know we're not talking about it, but I was a little let down by Age of Ultron.
Oh, we're going to talk about it. We're going to do Age of Ultron.
But Civil War, I was not. Civil War was incredible. And again, I feel like in these big movies, Marvel typically does a pretty good job of of advancing their story but giving people what they want. And I feel like if I had to pick one movie this year that I'm like, people are not going to be disappointed in, I would probably wager my money on Infinity War.
Yeah, they haven't let us down yet. I know I was saying that with Patty Jenkins, but it's true with Kevin Feige and Marvel. Let me ask you this, a closing question here.
Closing question.
We're not going to rate it because it's obviously confirmed epic.
Well, it's good to have.
Is there more hype?
They didn't say Avengers Assemble.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry. Is there more hype going into Infinity War than there was going into Avengers, or do you think it's about the same?
I will say I feel like there was more hype for Avengers in some way because it was like such a new concept. But I think right now, too, the thing is there's so many Marvel movies that...
3 a year.
Yeah, that it's tough to... I think the Black Panther hype is still going. Like, the Black Panther hype is still going, and we haven't even hit the Infinity War hype yet.
I think that it's a different kind of hype. It's this culmination of everything we've been building toward. And
I think people are nervous. I mean, I was talking to some folks the other day, and people are really nervous, like that, you know, Cap's going to die, or Iron Man's going to die, or, you know, lots of people are going to die. So, I mean, there is a nervousness, too, going on.
Which makes you realize how good of a job Disney, Marvel, Kevin Feige's done. People are nervous about losing fictional characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that kind of says it all right there. And I want to do, before, we'll see how much time we have, I want to revisit Age of Ultron, Iron Man 2, and Civil War. We're definitely going to get to Age of Ultron. We'll see if we get to the other two. But Jerry, this was a lot of fun tonight, and I really appreciate you, coming on. We both get up really early. We both live on the East Coast, and this is just a passion project. We love doing this. It's our chance. We check in a lot throughout the week, but it's our chance to really check in. So, Jerry, I appreciate you being on here, man.
Glad to be here tonight.
Absolutely. And
talk about Avengers.
Next week, we're going to go in a little bit different direction. Our plan is on episode 89 of the pod to review Best Picture winner Guillermo del Toro's Shape of Water. So, Jerry, we'll check that out this week and talk about that next week. That's the plan. Sometimes plans change.
It's all part of the plan.
We may be like a dog chasing cars and may decide to talk about Iron Man 2. Who knows? But right now... You ever
dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
And so a lot of y'all know I have a kid on the way. I really want to record a confirmed crap on The Room and
maybe you should watch The Room before you call it crap, Brad.
Oh no, I'm gonna watch it. I'm probably gonna buy it here soon. But
I said you should watch it before you call it crap. I want to watch it with you, like in person. We need to watch it together.
We should do a commentary on it. That's what we should do. Like
what a story, Brad.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Mark. God.
One time. This is funny. Real quick. I know you gotta go. One time, AKA Andrew Stokes and I were eating at this like Chinese Japanese buffet in Shelby.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here, and I had just seen The Room. Like, I had just seen it, and I'm trying to explain this movie to him. And there's these young women are sitting in this booth, like behind us, and all of a sudden, this one lady walks over and she goes, "Excuse me." I'm like, "Oh yeah," and she goes, "You're tearing me apart, Lisa!" And she just like yells in the middle of the restaurant, which is one of the big lines from that movie. It was just so funny because I'm still explaining this movie to Andrew. This was quite a few years ago, and he's like still trying to grasp this movie, and this girl just runs over and starts yelling lines from it. So. And
Jerry, I have to watch The Room. I've seen the big.
And that's how Andrew met Kate. No, I'm just kidding. So.
Yeah, you have to watch. That's hilarious. You have to watch Disaster Artist.
I really want to see it. I've read the book.
I mean, because it's a big Hollywood movie. It's no Mickey Mouse
Hollywood
stuff.
Movie.
Okay, big Hollywood movie. No Mickey Mouse stuff like Avengers. But that's going to wrap up the 88th edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. We hope you always find room for us in your weekly listening schedule. Jerry, where can people find more of you on the internet, my friend?
They can check me out at Action Figure Barbecue, BARBECUE.com. And Action Figure Barbecue also does have a Facebook page.
Oh, yeah, and go like Jerry on Facebook. I mean,
like Action Figure Barbecue on Facebook.
You know where to find me, at The Real Brad Bell, DREEL, Brad Bell on Twitter. Post links to all my stuff. Geeks Worldwide, thegww.com, and, of course, the Epic Review, thepicreview.com. And once again, from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, we are out.
That's all I have to say about that.
This has been a production of the GWW Radio Network. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, check out Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com for all the latest news, reviews, and opinions on video games, comics, movies, TV, cosplay, and more. Geeks, assemble!
Roll out.